You might think the United States' military presence overseas is a story of global power and protection. But in Okinawa, it's been a decades-long story of tension, controversy, and outright conflict. Imagine living in a place where foreign soldiers occupy nearly a fifth of your land, conduct frequent drills, and sometimes act with little regard for local laws. How would you feel? Would you accept it in the name of security, or would you fight for your home? For the people of Okinawa, the answer has been clear for decades. Enough is enough. The roots of this feud go back to the end of World War II. In 1945, Okinawa became the site of one of the bloodiest battles in history. More than 100,000 civilians died. Entire towns were obliterated, and the scars left behind would last generations. When the war ended, the U.S. took control of the islands, ostensibly for security and to maintain a strategic presence in the Pacific. But what started as military occupation turned into a permanent base network, with the U.S. controlling around 70% of all American military facilities in Japan, despite Okinawa making up less than 1% of Japan's land area. From the very beginning, Okinawans resisted. They wanted autonomy, they wanted to rebuild their communities, and they wanted their culture and land back. But the U.S. military presence meant frequent accidents, noise, and even crimes committed by station personnel. Over the years, there have been incidents, ranging from environmental damage to tragic crimes against local residents, each fueling resentment and sparking protests. Can you imagine seeing your local park, once a place for families and festivals, suddenly fenced off for live-fire exercises? This is not just a story of military logistics, it's about people's lives being disrupted for decades. Fast forward to the 1950s and 60s, when Okinawa was still under U.S. administration. During this period, tensions escalated. Land was confiscated for military bases, often with little compensation, and cultural practices were disrupted. Local Okinawans, who had survived the horrors of war, were now facing a new form of control. Every time the U.S. promised temporary bases, they became semi-permanent. Families who had farmed the same land for generations were forced to relocate. Imagine planting rice on your family land for decades, only to be told one day that your farm is now a firing range. That anger, that sense of injustice, has been passed down through generations. When Okinawa was returned to Japan in 1972, many hoped things would change. The Japanese government negotiated with the U.S. to reduce the burden on the islands, but the reality remained. About half of all U.S. bases in Japan are still in Okinawa. Noise pollution, helicopter drills, and low-flying fighter jets are everyday life for residents. And when incidents occur like accidents involving military vehicles or crimes committed by service members, the local population feels ignored. The legal framework often favors the military, leaving victims frustrated and unheard. Doesn't it seem unfair that ordinary citizens live with these dangers while the military operates almost with impunity? Over the decades, Okinawans have organized mass protests. Tens of thousands of people have marched, demanding the reduction or removal of U.S. bases. Yet, every time, political and strategic considerations seem to outweigh local voices. The U.S. sees Okinawa as a critical strategic hub for projecting power in East Asia, a deterrent against threats, and a quick response point for conflicts in the region. But for Okinawans, it's less about global security and more about personal safety, peace, and cultural preservation. How do you balance national security with local rights? It's a question that has no easy answer, yet the local population continues to fight for their homes and voices to be respected. One of the most controversial bases is Feud Air Station. Located in a densely populated urban area, Feud has been called one of the most dangerous bases in the world. Helicopters take off and land over schools, homes, and hospitals. Accidents have happened, and fear is a constant companion for those living nearby. The Japanese government proposed relocating Feud to a less populated area, but the plan has been met with fierce resistance from both locals and environmental activists. The struggle over Feud is not just about safety, it's about power, negotiation, and decades of promises that have yet to be fully realized. Incidents involving U.S. military personnel have also inflamed tensions. There have been cases of assaults, drunk driving, and other criminal behavior. Each incident sparks outrage, sometimes leading to international media attention. And yet, many Okinawans feel that justice is often delayed or denied. With the status of forces agreement providing the military certain protections that shield personnel from local legal systems. Can you imagine living under such conditions, knowing that if something happens, justice may be out of reach? It's a situation that breeds anger and fuels the decades-long feud. But it's not all negative. The U.S. military also contributes economically. Bases provide jobs, contracts, and business opportunities for some locals. Yet, for many, the economic benefits don't outweigh the social, environmental, and cultural costs. The tension is a constant push and pull. Do you prioritize short-term economic gains or long-term quality of life? Okinawa's story is a case study in this difficult balance. Culturally, the presence of U.S. bases has also created friction. Okinawa has a unique identity, with its own language, traditions, and history distinct from mainland Japan. The military presence has introduced American culture, sometimes blending, sometimes clashing. For younger generations, this can mean opportunities to learn English and access new experiences. But for older generations, it can feel like broken slow. Constant invasion of foreign influence on their homeland. How do you preserve culture while living under the shadow of a global superpower? Okinawa continues to wrestle with this question every day. One of the most compelling aspects of this feud is its intergenerational nature. Children who grew up seeing protests, hearing about accidents, and living near bases now carry the stories forward. Activists today are building on decades of history, using modern tools like social media to broadcast their message globally. Yet, despite international attention, the feud remains unresolved. How would you feel if your home, your land, and your rights were continually negotiated over while outsiders made the final decisions? The feud isn't just local, it's political. The Japanese government has historically supported U.S. presence for security and alliance purposes, even when local sentiment is overwhelmingly against it. Okinawans often feel their voices are drowned out in Tokyo, leading to resentment not just against the U.S., but against their own government. This dual frustration adds layers of complexity. When people ask, why hasn't this been resolved in decades? The answer isn't simple, it's strategic, political, and deeply human. There are environmental consequences too. Large bases mean deforestation, pollution, and destruction of delicate ecosystems. Coral reefs, rare species, and local flora can be impacted by noise, construction, and chemical runoff. For an island like Okinawa, where the natural environment is integral to both culture and economy, these impacts are significant. Every drill, every construction project, every flight over the island has a ripple effect. Yet these are often underreported outside Japan. Isn't it frustrating when the cost of global strategy is felt most by those who have no say in it? Over time, solutions have been proposed, debated, and delayed. Base relocations, shared responsibilities, and environmental mitigation plans have been floated repeatedly. Yet progress is slow. Politics, both domestic and international, often trumps the urgent demands of everyday citizens. The feud persists because it is tied not just to land and people, but to global power, national security, and the legacy of war. What makes this feud so compelling to study and discuss is its universality. While it is uniquely Okinawan in history and geography, the tension between local populations and military powers is a global story. From South Korea to Germany, from Italy to the Philippines, residents near bases face similar conflicts. But Okinawa's story stands out because of its intensity, its longevity, and the deeply human consequences for those living in the shadow of power. Despite everything, Okinawans have shown resilience. They organize, protest, negotiate, and educate. They remember their history, and they demand justice. Young activists learn from elders, blending traditional protest methods with modern technology to amplify their voices worldwide. Each generation adds pressure, showing that even in the face of decades of occupation and conflict, local voices matter. You might be wondering, what is the future of Okinawa and the U.S. military presence? Will there be a compromise that satisfies both security needs and local demands? Or will the feud continue indefinitely, a stubborn relic of history that refuses to die? The answer is uncertain, but one thing is clear. The story of Okinawa is a reminder that power and strategy often come with human costs, and those costs cannot be ignored forever. So, what lessons can we take from this decades-long feud? First, the importance of listening to local voices. Decisions made far away, no matter how strategic, have real human consequences. Second, the resilience of communities matters. Even against global powers, organized, persistent local activism can make an impact. And third, history is never just in the past, it shapes the present, influencing politics, culture, and daily life for generations. Think about it. If you lived in Okinawa, how would you feel about the bases? Would you protest? Would you try to negotiate? Or would you accept it, believing it's for the greater good? These are the questions Okinawans have asked themselves for decades, and they continue to wrestle with them today. In the end, the feud between Okinawa and the U.S. military isn't just a story about land or strategy, it's about people, culture, and the struggle for agency in the face of power. It's about remembering history, protecting the present, and shaping the future. And it's about asking difficult questions that have no easy answers. Will the story ever end? Maybe, but for now, Okinawa's struggle is a vivid reminder that the human cost of military strategy is never abstract. It is lived, felt, and remembered every single day.